Welcome back to the program. Time to have a look at what's been happening online this week with our social media panel. Joining us, as he does every week, our digital editor and social media expert, John Bergen. Also with us this week, Ed Tadros, who's the data journalist at the Australian Financial Review. Welcome to you. And joining us again, Sarah Wilson, blogger and social media commentator, joining us from the CBD in Sydney today. Welcome to you as well. And John Bergen, we might start with your tweet of the week. What have you picked out this week as the standout?
Tweet of this week around goes to a bit of an issue that was brought to the head. You know, one of the most important institutions in our country, that is democracy and parliament, was at loggerheads with freedom of expression and access to technology. Steve Gibbons, Labor MP, tweeted quite controversially.
It's not like him.
No, that's right. About a couple of hecklers, or more than a couple of hecklers, I should say, really sort of gathered in the public gallery.
They were calling Julia Gillard a liar.
Calling out abuse, that's right. Election now, stand down. He said, oh, it looks like Tony Abbott has contracted out this nasty side to interjectors in the public gallery, a new low Eden for the Libs. Now, the opposition manager of business, Christopher Pyne, took some umbrage at this and actually took the issue to the Speaker. And so she found that she had to grapple with not only sort of quelling an unruly Parliament, but just sort of this underlying tension between technology and parliamentary process.
It's an interesting question because in Parliament there are behavioural rules that MPs can't say certain things, they can't do certain things, they have to abide by the rules, otherwise they're out of order, they can be kicked out. But they're allowed to tweet all sorts of things. Now, this, I guess, is an interesting question for the Speaker. She ruled on this yesterday after question time. Have a look.
Speaker, my question is to you whether you will ask the member for Bendigo to withdraw an extremely unpleasant and untrue statement that he has published on Twitter out of question time today about the interjectors in the gallery.
If the Leader of the Opposition wants to stop people tweeting during question time, he should perhaps speak to many other people in the place. That would be my only comment on that. Obviously, during question time, I'm not seeing what Twitter is saying. I'm actually not on it for my own personal sanity, and I'd highly recommend everybody else getting off it for that very reason themselves. But I will investigate the matter. I have had concerns raised to me about the use of Twitter during question time, and I take this matter very seriously.
So she's investigating it further. That's no final ruling there.
She has actually arrived at a final ruling after some deliberation. I'll read it out. It says, to prevent tweeting would necessitate a blanket restriction on all electronic and communications devices in the chamber. Although this may appeal to some members, I would imagine be strongly resisted by others.
Sarah, do you think that's a smart move, letting MPs tweet away during question time? I suppose there's no real way of stopping it.
I don't think there is much hope. I think, once again, technology moves faster than we were able to adapt and to be able to sort of, I guess, respond in a decent way. I think her comments about getting off Twitter is not a bad one for somebody like Steve Gibbons. I mean, he keeps coming up, doesn't he? He was the one, of the bimbo douchebag comment not so long ago and having to apologise. So I think he probably needs not so much to come off Twitter, but sort of to go back to, I guess, decency school. You know?
Ed, there's one thing about MPs being careful in what they tweet, but this is about what they do during question time, when they're meant to be focused on the debate that's actually happening.
Well, exactly, and it's like they're bringing the battle to a whole. So there's what's going on physically, but then they're having this whole another battle on the social media front. And
is it parliamentary or not? What they're saying on Twitter?
Well, look, it seems to be that when it comes to social media, they're a bit more looser with their standards than they would be in Parliament.
Yeah, that's right. Now, John, Darren Chester this week also got a lot of media focus, but particularly online media focus, for calling for an end to the sort of personal attacks that we have seen on the Prime Minister. Yeah, he's not talking about MPs so much here, but members in his electorate that he's spoken to, and from what I understand, some pretty horrible stuff that's been said about Julia Gillard.
That's right. He came back from his electorate and his message at the doors was quite simple, which was, guys, we need to raise the tone of this debate. We need to lay off the PM. His feeling, and a lot of other people's feeling, is that it's descended into some quite nasty and brutal sort of ad hominem attacks. And he felt that It is time to focus not on the person but on the policies and their performance, and he won a lot of favour from people that, it's fair to say, probably wouldn't be aligned with his side of politics and wouldn't vote for him, but they were saying, look, good on you for making a stand, and I hope that more people on your side of politics actually have listened to what you've got to say, and people out in Voterland listen as well.
Yeah, Sarah, what did you make of that and the online reaction to it?
Well, I think once again, what we see on Twitter isn't necessarily indicative of what's happening, I guess, out there in the rest of the country. Twitter people generally are left-leaning, so they're going to be quite supportive of his stance there. So I don't know that it's necessarily indicative. However, it is indicative, I guess, of a certain, strata of the community. I mean, we are feeling that way, but I'm not surprised at all to see that sort of the Twitterverse supporting him there and coming out with, and I say this, I think each time I come on here, but these sycophantic comments. There's a lot of sycophantic behaviour that happens on Twitter when somebody does the right thing, and there was a lot of support for his comments today, certainly.
Now, Ed, the issue of the media reforms that the Minister Conroy announced during the week. We've seen a lot of condemnation from big media players, particularly News Limited. But how did this play out online? Well,
look, our media writer Ben Holgate, he's a bit more across it than me, and I had a chat to him before I came along here, and what he thinks is that given the time they had to develop something, they probably came up with something that didn't have enough detail. And if you're asking about the social media reaction, so what you're getting there, as Sarah said, is you're getting people who are really engaged and enthusiastic about the process. So they're going to bring along their political baggage with it. So I'm not quite sure how representative it is of what the wider community thinks. I'm not quite sure how much the wider community actually pays attention to these things. I know we all care because we're in the industry, but I'm not quite sure.
Well, it's a good point. It's a good point. And in fact, John, we have some data on this, how this issue of media reform played out around the country. Now, this is data from SR7 that they've produced for us. And it is, if you like, a heat map here. And the red is where most of the tweets are coming from. So this, John, just talk us through this. This is on the issue of media reform. And you can see where it's been really talked about the most on Twitter.
So this is a heat map that basically measures the intensity and frequency of tweets. The red represents approximately 1,000 tweets over a 7-day period. The green is in the low hundreds. And the two maps that we have together actually shows this real sort of division between what people sort of are invested in and what they tweet about frequently and what interests them in sort of, I guess it's fair to say, metropolitan markets and the bush. Now, coal seam gas is a huge issue, and you can see that it has a much more
really
significant geographic spread.
Yeah, this one's on the coal seam gas, and yes, it's still being tweeted about in Canberra, but you can see a lot more of a spread through the areas of northern New South Wales and Queensland where coal seam gas is a red-hot issue.
Yeah, that's exactly right. But to return to media reform, an enormous issue that has generated a vast amount of tweets in a very small amount of time, and it's fair to say that we can't really have a debate about the online reaction without citing and referencing the Daily Telegraph's front page. Now,
yes.
A lot of people were up in arms about this. A lot of people are saying this is exactly why we need greater we need an independent umpire to oversee self-regulation and make sure that Press Council and other regulatory bodies do exactly what they claim to do. A lot of the other people were saying, look, this is clearly satire. This is a tabloid newspaper arguing in a new robust and tabloid way what their readers would probably believe in and what they believe in, and sort of pushing their view quite stridently.
Well, yeah, Sarah, isn't this the sort of thing that tabloid newspapers here and around the world do? With an issue, have a bit of fun with it, make their point on the front page like that. It didn't get that sort of reaction online, did it?
No, I think people felt it went too far. I think that's been the online reaction. I know that certainly there's been representatives from News Limited overnight talking about the fact, well, it's tabloid, that's what we do, we're allowed to do this. But I think the general public don't feel that way. And just going by today's, I think the follow-up that was from yesterday's paper. Today's paper had an apology to Stalin for lumping him in the same category as Conroy. And that actually got quite a lot of feedback, I felt, on Twitter Twitter and social media with people quite outraged. They felt that it went too far. You know, I think a lot of people don't really understand the ins and outs of the debate of this, and I think we've discussed this on this program before, that when it's too complex, it's really hard to kind of capture it in 140 characters or less. So people generally go with that kind of outrage or the human element. The actual details, I think, are lost on most people, but I actually don't think that the Daily Telegraph did itself any favours in terms of, you know, winning over the public, which I presume is what they're trying to do here. It's too complex an issue, and they've dumbed it down into these sort of tabloid screamers, which I believe also went too far, especially today.
Yeah, well, we'll see. This still has a week to play out whether these reforms are going to get through or not. We're out of time for this segment, though. Sarah Wilson, John Bergen and Ed Tadros, thanks so much for joining us this week. Really appreciate it. Now, after the break, we're going to turn to Rome and have a look at the election of Pope Francis. We'll be talking to the head of Caritas Australia about what this is going to mean for the world's 1.2 billion Catholics, and in particular, the election of the first Jesuit Pope.